Welcome back, everyone. Please take a seat. Thank you, friends.
Recording in progress.
Oh, recording is in progress. Please be seated as we prepare for the presentation of the Snyder Award. This award is presented by FCNL every year to a member of Congress who has worked tirelessly to promote legislation to create a more peaceful world. To present the award, please welcome back to the stage Bridget Moix.
You really don't have to clap every time I get on this stage, friends. Please don't. Thank you. Aw. So we are waiting for the Congresswoman. I think she's arrived. Please, welcome. Come on in, come up to the stage. Welcome to Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs. FCNL's Edward F. Snyder Award for National Legislative Leadership in Advancing Disarmament and Building Peace is named after our beloved second Executive Secretary Ed Snyder. He was a tireless advocate for nuclear disarmament and peace in the 35 years he worked at FCNL. Our General Committee designed this award to recognize congressional leadership for peace and justice consistent with our values. Past recipients have included Senator Joseph Biden, Senator Patrick Leahy, Representative John Lewis, and Representative Ann Wagner. I'm very happy tonight to welcome Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, who will receive the 30th Ed Snyder Award. Sarah represents the 51st Congressional District in California, and we are honored and grateful that she's taken time out of a very busy schedule to be with us this evening. Congresswoman Jacobs is in her second term in Congress, and she's already making a big impact on the Hill on issues we care deeply about. She serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, including leading as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Africa. She's also a member of the House Armed Services Committee. And so she has powerful oversight of all the wings of U.S. foreign policy, diplomacy, development, and the military. She is also the youngest member of leadership for her party, and when she was appointed to the House Armed Services Committee, her press release explicitly noted she will also focus heavily on ending the forever wars, representing the millennial generation that has never known a day in their adult lives that the United States has not been at war. Prior to serving in Congress, Representative Jacobs worked on addressing conflict, instability, and inequality around the world, with experience at UN peacekeeping operations, UNICEF, and the State Department's Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations. So as she makes policy on the Hill now to strengthen U.S. government's peace-building toolbox, she knows from her own direct experience what building better civilian capacities for peace requires. Our community will also be interested to know that prior to serving in Congress, she served as a scholar in residence at the Joan B. Kroc School of Peace Studies at the University of San Diego. And she founded the San Diego for Every Child, a coalition dedicated to ending child poverty in San Diego County. Around this time last year, I was pleased to meet with Representative Jacobs and her staff and our staff, and I was so impressed not only by the deep knowledge and commitment to this work and the issues we care about and that we'll be lobbying on this weekend, but also her strategic policymaking skill and mind, and the relationships of care and friendship that I could see between her staff and our staff. So thank you, and thank you to all your staff. Please let them know. I just want to say a few more words about specific leadership accomplishments of the Congresswoman before I turn the award over to her. Representative Jacobs co-founded and co-chairs the Protection of Civilians in Conflict Caucus. She introduced the Atrocity Prevention Act to protect and expand the impact of the Elie Wiesel Genocide and Atrocity Prevention Act, which we were just talking about earlier. She co-sponsored and voted for bills to repeal the 2002 authorization for use of military force in Iraq, another important issue for our community. And she's spoken out repeatedly against cluster munitions and introduced and advanced bipartisan amendments to ban their transfer and sale. She is the youngest Jewish member of Congress and has been calling for a cessation of hostilities in Israel and Gaza, to establish humanitarian corridors and bring aid to those in need in Gaza. We're very grateful for your leadership for a more peaceful world, Congresswoman. And I'm honored to present you with the Edward F. Snyder Award. We'll try to take some more pictures afterwards too, but I want to welcome you to share some remarks with us.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much for having me here, and thank you for this award. It really means a lot. I'm so grateful to you all for the work that you do to help build a world where everyone is safe, free, and equal, and where communities can build and sustain peace and address conflict without violence. I'm especially honored to receive this award today because, as you heard, peace building has been a major focus of my career and my work in Congress. When I worked at the State Department and the UN and UNICEF, I saw firsthand the power that these institutions can have in creating lasting stability. And I've seen that they can head off conflicts years before they happen by investing in governance and strengthening human rights. But I've also seen how these institutions have been consistently underfunded for years. And what's equally important is that they've been consistently undervalued and treated as a less effective option than our military, and we know that couldn't be further from the truth. The decades that the United States and the international community spent in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, have yielded little gains in ending conflict and violence, and in some cases have made things worse. My generation grew up in the shadow of these wars. And as a representative of San Diego, the country's largest military community, my community played a big role in shaping my upbringing and my worldview because my community has lived and suffered the human cost of war, which makes it that much worse when it doesn't actually even yield the foreign policy goals that we want. That's why I've been a big proponent of investing in peace building, strengthening human rights, and prioritizing diplomacy, which couldn't be more important as our world faces wars in different regions. About a quarter of the world's population and nearly 3 in 4 of the world's extreme poor live in communities rife with chronic instability, conflict, or violence. And we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic that fueled inequities, worsened grievances, grew mistrust of government and institutions, and created perceptions of injustices surrounding jobs, healthcare, livelihoods. We also know that the impact of conflict isn't contained by borders. Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine has worsened the threat of hunger and starvation around the world, especially in the Middle East and Africa. In Sudan, violence has erupted between the Sudanese armed forces and rapid support forces, forcing Sudanese civilians to bunker in their homes as explosions ricochet around the city and the civilian death toll climbs. We are now seeing levels of atrocities in Darfur that we haven't seen since the early 2000s. And the fighting has the potential to spill across borders and destabilize an already fragile region. And like for many of you, what's going on in the Middle East right now has been personal and painful for me. As a child, I actually spent every other summer visiting my family who lives in Tel Aviv, while on the other summers, my cousins would come stay with us in San Diego. So when I woke up on October 7th, I was horrified by the images and the footage that we saw of Hamas's attack. And I worried about my family that lives there. Just last week, my one cousin sent me a picture of a piece of rocket shrapnel that she found right outside her bomb shelter when she came out. My other cousin has an 18-month-old who had to sleep in a bomb shelter night after night. Many of my family has since evacuated and others are staying put. But I'm also devastated that the Netanyahu government's military campaign has killed thousands of Palestinian civilians, including thousands of children. Indiscriminate bombing will not bring peace to Israel or the region, and it won't lead to long-term safety and security. It's so important that the United States is clear about this. The importance of a rules-based order, protecting civilians, and upholding international humanitarian law isn't just for our adversaries, but for our allies too. That is the only way to preserve our moral authority and build international coalitions that are essential for our national security and to advance our goals around the world. The United States cannot be a leader on the world stage if we don't lead with our values. That's why in Congress, I'm focused on creating a foreign policy that reflects the world we live in, reflects our values, and actually advances our priorities in the short term, but also the long term. And a part of that work means living our values, especially during times of war, and holding our partners and allies to these same standards. I founded and chair the Protection of Civilians in Conflict Caucus to prevent, minimize, and limit civilian harm, conduct much-needed oversight, and push legislation that protects kids, families, and civilians in harm's way around the world. And another part of that work is making the case for the importance of foreign aid and assistance and why it matters here at home. You know, foreign aid is less than 1% of our overall budget. I know you all know that, but somehow the majority of Americans do not. And it has the power to promote good governance, human rights, and economic development in communities in order to prevent conditions that lead to violent extremism and conflict, like weak institutions, corruption, and abusive governments and militaries. I'm also pushing for a fundamentally new approach to how the United States addresses conflict, because our military-first approach, it doesn't work. So I was very encouraged when Congress passed the Global Fragility Act in 2019 to create and implement an adaptable whole-of-government approach to address, minimize, and prevent the root causes of conflict and instability. And now I'm focused on conducting oversight as we implement the Global Fragility Act in the priority countries of Mozambique, Haiti, Libya, Papua New Guinea, and coastal West Africa. This is really important because the United States has the opportunity to actually do things differently, to focus on addressing the root causes and invest in prevention and peace-building tools. And Congress has a huge role to play here because it's important that we do our part. We need to provide robust funding for GFA accounts to operationalize these plans and provide flexibility to the executive branch so that the 3Ds, development, diplomacy, and defense can effectively coordinate and work together. And we also need to focus on locally led peace building and development. Bringing in people who are involved in and most affected by violent conflict to create solutions is the most effective, efficient, and equitable way to do development work. We want to empower people, not dictate to them what's best, and in worst case scenarios, perpetuate harmful cycles of colonization. And that means we need to work directly with local organizations, both in the design of the programs and in the implementation. Local people know how to solve their own problems. They just need the resources to do it, and we can provide that. Now, we know that when it comes to foreign policy and creating long-term peace and stability, there are no easy or quick solutions. And that's why it's so important to have partners inside and outside of government focused on these issues. So I want to thank you all for all of your work, for all of your advocacy, for everything that you are doing. It is such an honor to be doing this work alongside all of you, and I'm so grateful for this award. Thank you so much.
Friends, I think you can see how well-deserved this award is. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking time to be with us. We do want to get a couple more photos, and we have some folks from San Diego area here, I think, to join us with the photo. If you can come up for the photo, and then we'll be moving to our next program.